Okay, thank you so much. Today we have Lesley Wilder joining us. So, Leslie, if you just want to start by introducing yourself, where you're a chief of staff at, that would be great.
Yes, thank you, Melanie, and thank you to Elevation Chief of Staff for having me. So I'm Lesley Wilder. I'm Chief of Staff to the Dean and President at Seminary of the Southwest. We're a small higher education institution, predominantly forming priests in the Episcopal Church, as well as counselors for the state of Texas to ultimately earn their license in professional counseling with a spiritual aspect and formation. So, yeah, I've been in this role for 8 years. First 4 years were, no, probably first three were as the executive assistant, and the last five as the chief of staff. And prior to that, I was administrative assistant to the registrar and assessment director. So I've really grown within the institution, and the role has evolved, and I've really enjoyed the ride. Yeah.
I really love that. It's cool to see with so many people nowadays seeming to job hop. It's really cool to see that you've built a career with one organization and that they've given you that room for growth. So you went from administrative assistant to executive assistant to chief of staff. So I really love that journey. A lot of people that I work with are executive assistants also. They start as executive assistants and they want to become chiefs of staff, but they're sort of concerned about, is it too much of a leap? How was that transition for you?
That transition has been it's been both difficult and beautiful, right? So um, I was deeply empowered by the president at the time that promoted me ultimately um, to sort of I guess tread my own way through the waters, and there was a lot of trust there. But I did keep that EA hat. So that's where the difficulties kind of came in and are still very present. And I'm working strategically, literally on a daily basis, to identify them and be clear with them, and sort of manage my time so that I do have devoted time to be the chief and the right hand, while at the same time making sure the stack of files don't reach the ceiling. So it's the only reason I got to where I am. However, I do find it burdensome at times. So the ultimate goal would be to have my own EA in this top office so that we could be more productive and collaborative without my bandwidth being stretched too far.
Yeah, that's so important. I think a lot of people have that confusion around like thinking the chief of staff can do the EA's job, the EA can do the chief of staff's job. It happens a lot more than you would think. So yeah, it's hopefully you can get to that place where they realize, hey, for me to be most effective and most impactful, I just need to focus on the chief stuff, and we need someone else handling the EA sort of day-to-day stuff.
Yeah, and I will say too that you know, I we're a very progressive institution. I say church, and oftentimes people aren't sure if it's progressive or the conservative side of the church. And this is very much, rooted in Austin, Texas, the very progressive side of the Episcopal Church. So we not only, accept women and people of color and LGBTQ community members into our space, but we celebrate them, we elevate them, we make sure they have a seat at the table. And so, as I'm behind that and working alongside the leadership to do so, I'm also finding my own struggles in being a woman and a chief, and being, as we all know, as a woman, inherently, we're just so good at multitasking and so good at
Yes.
compartmentalizing. It's like, yes, I could do this chief of staff role for the rest of my career and the EA role for the rest of my career, and this place would still run and it would be successful. But why should I have to? And so I've been trying to, my inner moral compass there, and allowing myself something that we as an institution celebrate allowance to others. That's kind of where I am in my own like professional, personal struggle with support in my office, really. And the leadership here has a lot of trust in me, and I have a lot of patience with them. And I've been here for 12 years, so I feel like it's truly like a family and a relationship. Like it's beyond just working relationship. We care for one another, and so I believe that that's kind of the reason why I got to where I am. However, it is like a family with dysfunction, and so there is a lot of uh, some struggle for me, um, paving the way and making sure that what I'm doing and what I'm modeling in the top office is something that's deserved and given to others, both from the top down. So I'm always thinking globally. I'm always thinking about others, especially the staff. And the best way that I describe my role here at the seminary is um, I'm a voice for the staff and an ear for the president, so that I'm advocating in both directions. So yeah.
I love that. I love that. Voice for the staff, ear for the president. I'm writing that one down.
Yeah, write it down. It's good. It really
Yeah.
resonates with me.
Yeah. And that's such a good call out too, how you mentioned that, especially as women, we can do it all, but we shouldn't have to. We often, like, we're really good at multitasking. In the chief of staff role, you do have to multitask a lot. There's a lot that you're juggling. But yeah, it is hard when it all ends up falling on your shoulders just because you can do it.
Yeah, yeah.
But one thing I wanted to touch on too, so you mentioned you're at a nonprofit, it's higher education. People don't realize that there's chiefs of staff across all industries, across all sectors, um, stages. I always say of companies, like the chief of staff role is so different wherever you are, whoever you're working for. How would you describe like your typical duties as a chief of staff there?
Yeah. So I'll say I'll tell you a little story first, and then I'll go into that just to kind of give it what it deserves. So when I was gunning for this role, I was very careful. I wasn't pushy. I had a lot of research, a lot of support, and I sought counsel from a director. So he's a priest, he's a chaplain, and he's a counselor. And so he was a chaplain in the military for the. His name is the Reverend Dave Scheider. He's retired now, but he was over the Center for Counseling. And he was a great mentor for me, a great friend when he was on staff here. And I had brought my proposal to him before I took it to anyone else. And I said, "What do you think about this?" And he said, "Well, it's bold." And this was 5 years ago. So the surge of the chief role across higher education, at least, is fairly new, and especially in the church as well. So he said it was bold. And then he said, but he kind of gave me this backstory about the origination of the chief of staff in the military, and how he firmly believes that every leader of any sort needs a chief of staff to become successful. Like that's where the president of the United States, it's where the chief was born from, was from the military. That model, that right hand, that person that can be there to help lead an entire community to success, right? Be it a country, a school, a startup, tech, anything. And so he really gave me the wind, beneath my wings, and made me feel very confident with my proposal. As there was nothing selfish about it. It was purely for the institution and primarily the president. So yeah, so back to your question, the duties. So for me, I do a lot of strategy. So from the calendar to whether that be external events, special visitors, foundations, donors, the president's appointments, the meetings, internally, president's cabinet versus diocesan relations, just for an example, strategy about when those meetings should fall, knowing what kind of conversations need to happen, creating those agendas based on, where each meeting or gathering falls in the calendar. Like it wouldn't make much sense to have one meeting before the other, cart before the horse, that kind of thing. So that is really thread throughout my daily routine is just shuffling meetings around, figuring that out, making sure the right people are showing up for the visitors from the foundations that are coming to see the new building that they donated a couple $1 million for, So when it comes to calendar, it's strategy. When it comes to interdepartmental relations, it's strategy. So the best use of the president's time, especially, we just elected our new president, our ninth president. So he's actually the first lay leader to lead the seminary. So it's a pretty exciting time for us. And so the bishop has recently asked me to chair the presidential transition committee. So I have been working for the past few weeks trying to really feel good about a strategy, because when I approach strategy, it feels daunting, and the more daunting it is, the closer I move toward it, right? So if strategy is daunting and it's not something I can rehearse in my sleep, that means I need to devote time and energy on it. So what I've been doing lately, and this is good for summer months in academia, is thinking critically, with cogency about what exactly the president needs to be focusing on the first 3 months, the first 6 months, the first entire year, because everyone that has interest in the president and what the president needs to do have their own agenda. And so there could be some push and pull, institutional advancement has their priorities and their initiatives, communications, their priorities, their initiatives, the faculty, their priorities, their initiatives, the list goes on. And so being a new president, looking at all of this being thrown at you, having no idea truly which step you should take in which direction, that's kind of been the work that's cut out for me right now, is helping him discern what is the best use of his time, what can he absolutely not miss out on, looking at the budget, where can you travel, how often can you travel, seeing what the board has in mind for him this year. So strategy. So that's from the calendar to the president's time, all the way to the strategic plan. So we're also embarking on a new strategic plan. We do ours in 5-year increments. So we're completing ours this academic year, and we'll be beginning a new one with the new president, and the timing there is really good. So nonprofit capital campaign, we're approaching the next one. You're always another thing that Dave Scheider taught me was you're either in the beginning of, in the middle of, or just ending a capital campaign when you work in a nonprofit. So we just closed the door on one. We'll approach the next one in the next year. So yeah, I know that was kind of a broad view, but it's my jam.
Yeah, no, that's really exciting stuff. And it's cool. I love about the chief of staff position that we get into these really cool special projects and initiatives like you with this transition project. But you mentioned something too that has always been a challenge for me in the role, and I wonder if you faced it, is like you said, everyone has their own agendas. Everyone is competing for the president's time. And it's that, like, how do I juggle this? How do I align the larger goals, but I'm also dealing with different personality types? How has that been for you?
So that's I do pride myself on being able to truly remove my emotions from my work. And that's tricky, right? When you work in a religious institution, sometimes I have to make sure that I don't come off cold, and I am warm, and I'm always striving for a diplomatic approach, right? So, but if I have my emotions in it and I get frustrated because one VP is pulling the president in one direction and the other VP wants the president in the other, and that's frustrating for me because I could get in my emotions and be upset with that approach, or I could just look at it strategically and truly receive the proposals, encourage everyone to come to the president and the president's cabinet with their ideas, their initiatives, reasoning, like a full-blown proposal for what they want him to do. I stay always supporting as much communication, as much information as possible for the president. I know that it could be a common misconception that presidents know all and they should be able to just make decisions. But truly, and I know you know this, being three-time chief of staff, that they are only as strong as their leadership team.
Mhm.
So if their leadership team had um, no weigh in or buy in to their time and their energy, they would really get nowhere. And so if I'm the one that is even keel and has no emotions and I have space for his emotions, I have space for his frustrations, I can lay it out like a deck of cards and talk him through and work through what needs to happen for the greater good. And I think my degree in psychology, my middle child syndrome, I kind of have that like mediator mind where my emotions can wait, and that's how they're best processed. And so at work, it's really just about strategy. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that you mentioned holding space because it's really an underrated skill. I think that a lot of people are like, well, I know I need to, know X, Y, and Z, the hard skills, but holding space as chiefs of staff, we have to do that a lot. We have to be that trusted confidant for the president, the CEO, whoever we're supporting, but also, holding that space, allowing them to voice maybe frustrations that they can't tell the whole team because that
Yeah.
might be disastrous.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's cool how there's those sort of soft skills. And I always tell people too, really being a chief of staff, it's more of a mindset than a specific set of skills.
Yeah,
So
that's a great point. Yeah, and I say all these things as if it's just like this God-given thing, but no, truly, peer connections is where it's at for me, right? So we're on an island as a chief of staff. There's
mhm.
just one typically in an institution because you support the top, right? And so you don't really have anyone to commiserate to, and you don't want to commiserate to anybody because it's just there are too many conflicts of interest.
Yeah.
So for me, I have about three peer connections of other chiefs in higher education, small, middle, or medium, large institutions, higher ed across the country that I can call. I mean, I have one at 3 o'clock today, and I'm going to tell her about this. And so I couldn't do without that, right? These associations of fellow chiefs that where we can sort of hammer out our own struggles and our own experiences to help one another in our career goals. So yeah, I say that it's middle child syndrome, degree psychology. Yes, all of those help. I only have those because that's deeply rooted within me. However, I do put those emotions somewhere, and that's with peer connections.
Yeah. Community is so important. And you're right. It really is a siloed role. Which can be hard for some people. But there's so much, cross departmental and working with all of the different teams that you do get that interaction piece. But yeah, there are times you have to sort of keep things to yourself. Maybe you have some confidential information from the president. It's not ready to be shared. So yeah, that can be a tricky position to be in.
Yeah, you're a vault for sure. You have to be a vault, but at the same time, being that ear again, right? So, um, being an ear for the president, being an ear for anyone closer to the president, and being able to receive information without reaction, so that you have information to help the president come to a decision about something. So if you're a source of trust and reliability and comfort to others, then you do receive the good, the bad, the ugly. And as long as you can take all of that, you have all the pieces to the puzzle. If you only receive this and that, then and you're missing these other pieces, you could make a snap decision or a decision that's actually not for the ultimate good. And I do feel very proud and happy that we have a team that feel very comfortable with me, and they know that when they come to talk to me about something, that it truly is in trusted, confident hands, and also in a place where I can help strategize and find solutions. Um, I have this rule of thumb that I developed early on, because it has not been easy, um, where if more than one person comes to me with a complaint like similar in nature, whether it be about a fellow, employee or a student or a situation or safety issue, um, it has to be more than one person. So if it's just one, it's one off, I'll let them vent and we'll talk. But if it's more than one, I will always report that issue to the president.
Yeah.
And also, if somebody's knocking on my door or barging in my door or crawling to my door, and they say, I'm so upset or something, I stop them before we begin and I say, is this an official complaint, or do you just need a
Mm.
safe space to vent? And that actually gets them thinking, like, they hadn't even thought about that yet. Do I want to officially report this and make sure that this makes its way to the president, or do I really just need someone to talk to? And so that's been really helpful in both directions when I'm helping someone through a problem or a conflict, and it's also saved me a time or two. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's such a good rule of thumb. And I hadn't heard of that, of asking people when they come to you, because as chiefs of staff, people will come to you and you're sort of the go-to person for problems.
Yeah.
But asking them, hey, is this an official complaint, or do you just want to vent and need a safe space? So it's really beautiful that you offer that to people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think trust is so hard to build. It's great that you've had that longevity to help really establish yourself as someone they can trust, because it's so important. People have to be able to trust you and trust that you have like their best intentions and the organization's overall best
Yeah.
intentions in mind.
Yeah, and you're right. It's the longevity, truly, and that's kind of why I've played the long game, right? It just gets sweeter. Like the more I get to know this place, the more I get to know our external, relationships and our internal people that are working hard to make this place what it is. The more I fall in love with it, the more I can help promote it, the more I can keep the president looking and acting and being and feeling successful. So it literally just gets sweeter, really.
Yeah. I love that perspective, because there really is so much talk about like job hopping and, going to the next greatest opportunity, but you really can build your own great opportunities the longer that you stay and the deeper
Yeah.
you dive into an org.
Yeah, and obviously, for me, it was sort of a unique experience because I started working at this institution very young. So, being an administrative assistant in my early 20s wasn't a bad thing, right? Because I didn't have a mortgage yet, and I didn't have children, and I didn't, there wasn't tuition for my children and all that, all those things. So, I was fortunate enough to have the flexibility to devote the time and commit myself to a place to earn that trust and then slowly move up and find my place in leadership.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned doing a proposal, because that's something I actually have a template that I share with people about how to propose. Hey, if you're in this, particularly like an EA, a PM, certain HR roles, and you want to become a chief of staff, like here's a template. Here's how you explain that this is going to be a win for the organization, for the leader, and here's why I'm uniquely suited to it. Because I think there's a lot of people in those positions. Now, I'll speak for myself, starting in roles that may not have been really like clear, just looking at your resume that you should be a chief of staff. But when you build trust at a company and they see who you really are, they get to experience working with you, and they're not just looking at the piece of paper, like what you've done on your resume, then it's a lot easier to catapult into that chief of staff role. So
Yeah.
that's really cool that you were doing that 5 years ago, like
Yeah.
proposing it and putting
No, and
yourself out there.
I'll speak to that a little more. Like what I knew early on, maybe a year before I submitted the proposal, that I was a chief and that I was, living into the role, and it was evolving as the seminary was growing, but I wasn't shouting, hey, I'm actually a chief. I was quiet. I was methodical. I went to this gigantic conference that is associated with the American Council of Education. It's called National Association of Presidential Assistants in Higher Education. It's called NAPAHE, and it blew my mind. I was an EA, a new EA, and my boss sent me there, and it was like, I don't know, maybe 1,000 people, and it was in Washington D.C. And it's the first time I've ever heard of chief of staff anywhere aside from the government, and so there was a session that I decided to go to. It was like, are you an EA or are you actually a chief? And I was like, So I just moseyed on in there and I listened and I was like, I'm actually a chief. And so I talked to some people. I asked them to describe their job. It sounded just like mine. And then I connected with this individual. His name is Dr. David Hood. He's at a university in Rhode Island, and he teaches on business development and professional development. And he was so kind. He gave me his card. He coached me, and we had like 4 phone calls where he just like helped me sift through my resume, and he encouraged me. He said, you got to be devoted to the long game. So as you do things that fall into this category of a chief of staff's responsibilities, you write them down. Accomplishments, big projects, any kind of interdepartmental relations, external relations, just start to just jot them down and then put it on your job description, and then show the president when you bring your proposal. And he gave me all this advice, and I was just like, it was perfect. It was like, you could not say no to this. There was no way. And I wasn't like, oh, I need more money, and there was none of that. It was more just like, I need the recognition, because if I have the recognition, I can move us farther, right? Yes. And that's, the rest was history. But like, all of that is to say, studying yourself and doing your research and getting to know other chiefs, asking for their job description. I don't know a single chief of staff, at least in higher education, that wasn't willing to share their job description, share a conversation, a cup of tea. I even have happy hour with one from across the way. And we make sure that we're aligned in our career goals and that we're being supported the way that we should. And it really, really does feel like its own community of leaders. I don't know any other position that does this. So I'm grateful for all that.
Yeah, it's a really unique position in that I think we all feel sort of off on our own little islands. And so we're like, hey, let's just huddle together. Yeah, so it's really cool. Yeah. And I love it. That's amazing advice. There's so many people who are doing chief of staff work, but they don't realize it because they're not aware. That's part of the reason I wanted to do this, was to bring awareness to, like, this is what a chief of staff is. Like, this is what we do. It's a leadership position, and you're probably, certain roles like senior EAs and certain project managers, you might already be doing a chief of staff job and not realize it. Yeah. So let's get the recognition. Let's, push forward.
Yeah, it's not on a lot of org chart templates, right? Mm-hmm. So there's so many organizations that have a function that is similar to a chief that's not fully identified yet. And if someone is interested, or they know that what they do isn't in alignment with their title or their job description, that it is something to explore, especially if you are supporting to an extensive degree anyone in leadership.
Yeah. So I'm curious, what would be your advice you shared so much great advice and tips, but are there any like really particular takeaways you'd want to leave for people who are aspiring to become a chief of staff one day?
Yeah, I'll go back on just research. I think that was really it for me, market research, and finding those connections and being brave and bold and confident enough to reach out. The worst thing that could happen is someone moves your email to spam. Like, it's not a big deal. So LinkedIn, obviously that's how we connected. LinkedIn is a really easy and helpful way to get to know other chiefs, or, chiefs in general, if you aren't a chief yet. But getting access to a job description that has been made official at an institution that's like yours it's really the ticket, especially if that person has proven themselves to be an asset at that institution or company, per se, that's leverage, right? That actually could help tremendously, I think.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice. Looking back on your time as a chief of staff, is there anything you wish you knew beforehand, like something you know now that you wish you knew going into the role?
Yeah, what I now know, and I probably didn't know or recognize in the beginning, was the shift in working relationships with other staff. So for me, I didn't feel a shift. I thought I'm still me. I'm literally just been doing this other job under a different title. Nothing's changed. Please be yourself around me. And so it's good now, but I wasn't prepared for that curve, and that my optics aren't as good as others when it comes to um, I guess uh, I don't want to say a hierarchy, but that feeling of divide. And so there could have been some uh, maybe some education on my part, maybe less extremism on learning the role and getting to know other chiefs, and more focus on the transition for me, and in a small institution, and how to navigate that change and stay connected through the transition, and ensure to your fellow staff members that um, nothing is changing, and that you're still a safe space, um, and that you the trust and everything that you've built up to that point with others would remain the same. So yeah, that was the one thing that just kind of threw me a little bit, but I've been working hard to ensure that there's clarity in my role and my advocacy for the staff.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like you've done a great job at it. You're still a safe space for everyone at your organization. But yeah, it's definitely something that comes up a lot, is that when whether you're transitioning from one role into the chief of staff role at the organization you're at, or if you're a new chief of staff coming in just from nowhere, that little, early initial hill of like, okay, this person's a leader, they have this direct connection to the CEO or to the president, but they're also like an ally. How do you build that relationship? So it's a lot, but
Yeah.
it's usually all pretty fun. You get the hang of it.
Yeah. I will say my least favorite term when describing a chief of staff is an elevated executive assistant.
Oh, yes.
And for some reason that bothers me, because um, an executive assistant doesn't want to feel like they're not a chief yet, right? Some executive assistants are very comfortable and very proud, and that is their lane, and they're very good at it. Not everybody wants to become a chief of staff. And so calling it that, or being referred to as such, I think is actually discouraging and disheartening and discrediting to those executive assistants that do a kick-ass job. Um, so yeah, I just wanted to add that too.
Yeah, no, that's important. There's a lot of people, as the chief of staff role is gaining in popularity and just awareness about the role, a lot of people do think like, well, I just want to be a senior EA, or sorry, I should say, I want to be a senior EA. There's no just about it. It's a great career path, and people can stay there. It's not that you have to go to chief of staff next. Some people just who, they enjoy supporting a leader, and so they've been doing that in this EA role, but they want to be a little bit more strategic. They want to have a little bit more of an impact in the work that they're doing. They transition into chief of staff. But yeah, that's definitely not like a hierarchy thing.
Yeah. And I said elevated chief of staff, but I think what I was actually meaning to say was glorified.
Yeah.
Sorry, I said elevated EA. What I meant was glorified EA. So that's the term I don't really like, is the word glorified, because then that sounds like there is no glory to an EA, and that's not.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually just posted something on LinkedIn about that.
You did?
Yeah, I put like happy Friday to everyone except for people who still call chiefs of staff glorified EAs.
Oh my God, I haven't even seen that, and I love that.
Yeah, because I'm like, okay, guys, come on.
Seriously.
So but this is, it's great. And so I do appreciate you just having this conversation with me today, because we are bringing awareness to it. Unfortunately, you're right. There are a lot of people that think it's just a glorified EA, but by you sharing your story and just doing this, we're bringing awareness and breaking down those misconceptions about the role. So I really do appreciate your time. Is there anything else you want to share before we wrap up?
Yeah. I want to point out this uniqueness that I've observed in the chief of staff role as it relates to other people in leadership, vice presidents, executives, project managers, directors. Um, there's something about the chief of staff that sets aside that is set aside that others don't have, and that's that direct connection to a leader. So even though we do have our own projects and our own initiatives that are exclusive to our responsibility, we part of our job and part of the reason we are so good at what we do is because we are in the shadows, right? We do a lot of work that goes unnoticed for the reason to be unnoticed. Like,
Mhm.
I will say that I never, ever, ever want a president to look like they didn't write something. I would never want them to feel like someone believes that they didn't do that, that their chief of staff did it, right? So, like, my goal is always to sound like, to act like, to be just like the president when it comes to written form, when it comes to presentations. So a lot of that work is just invisible, right? And it's invisible for a reason, because you are helping the president be successful, or CEO. And so I just wanted to name that. It's a very unique, nobody else has that, right? So if there's a vice president of one department that is a direct report to that CEO or that president, that's their own work. They get to own it. They're supported by the president. They're endorsed by the president. The president will, congratulate them and praise them. But when it comes to a lot of our work, the type of work that no one gets to see with our name on it, there's a lot to say about a personality that's willing to do that, and beyond willing, like truly wants to do that type of work for the success of a different individual other than yourself. So I think
Yeah.
that's a big struggle, right?
Yeah, and that goes back to what we were touching on earlier. There's a lot of these soft skills and sort of mindset and personality types that can really lead to effectiveness and success in the chief of staff role. And that's really one of them, being like okay being behind the scenes and supporting someone else and like shining the light on someone else, making them look good.
Yeah.
And then also knowing like if you do want to, be in front of the cameras or whatever, in front of the scenes. I don't know the opposite of behind the scenes, but
We're on the cameras now, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But it's also such a great launch pad because when you are behind the scenes, you're seeing everything going on. You're getting the real inside scoop and you're getting trusted work experience with the leader. You can, if you want to go into another role, maybe a VP role, a role with more, visibility.
Yeah.
But you definitely, as a chief of staff, you have to be excited about shining a light on your leader and making them look good. So just another one of those sort of personality types, mindset things for being a
Yeah.
chief of staff.
Totally agree.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Lesley. I really appreciate your time. And I'll drop your LinkedIn bio wherever I post this so that people can reach out to you.
That's great, Melanie. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this time together today.
Thank you.